Today on The Real Story, we've got an election coming up on Tuesday. Some high-profile local races underway in our state. We're going to break down some of the interesting contests with two veteran journalists. Hartford Current Capitol Bureau Chief Chris Keating and the Current State House reporter Daniela Altamari will join us this morning. Plus, if you're feeling sick of the two-party rule, there's another option in Connecticut. The Serve America movement, or SAM, is recognized in our state and it's gaining some traction. In fact, Newtown's first selectman left the Democratic Party to run under SAM CT. We're going to explain what it's all about. First Selectman Dan Rosenthal, as well as SAM CT Chair Monty Frank, are our guests. It's all today on The Real Story. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Jen Bernstein. On Tuesday, the polls will open in Connecticut towns and cities for Election Day. Now, this isn't a particularly high-profile election year. These are municipal elections. But many would argue that this is where your vote can make the biggest impact because they directly dictate who's in charge of your community. There are some mayor's races, first selectman races, planning and zoning commission spots, and Board of Education seats. So let's highlight some of the races catching our attention across the state by bringing in two veteran political journalists. Joining us this morning, Hartford Current Capitol Bureau Chief Chris Keating and Hartford Current State House reporter Daniela Altamari. Welcome back to The Real Story to both of you.
Welcome.
Always good to have you both on. So I hope I accurately described the municipal elections that are going on in our state. I know you all have been kind of looking at the different races and trying to analyze them. So Chris, why don't we start with you? Where do you think the biggest races in our state that you're paying attention to?
Well, probably the most high profile is in Stamford, but we have fairly big races for mayor in Stamford and West Haven, New Britain, et cetera. But in Stamford, that's the race between Bobby Valentine and Caroline Simmons. It's a bit of a generational battle. Valentine is a 71-year-old former manager of the New York Mets and the Boston Red Sox. And Simmons is a 35-year-old Harvard-educated state legislator. The race got attention. It's been getting a lot of attention, but it got even more attention recently when Valentine referred to Simmons as a 35-year-old girl.
Yeah, I know. I was just reading your article that you wrote in the Hartford Current, and the context of that is he had said to actually, from what I was reading, Sue Haig, who's an Associated Press reporter, said that there's no chance of a 35-year-old girl who grew up in a private setting going to a private school in Greenwich, Connecticut, could possibly relate to the diverse culture of Stamford, Connecticut better than I do, no matter what the age is. She called those comments misogynistic and offensive.
Yeah, the two of them have not been getting along for a while. There's been a bunch of other issues. A lot of them are related to age. And Valentine made comments about people who are renting in Stamford, which is about 50% of the people, 50% own, 50% rent. And he was caught on videotape basically saying that the people who rent don't care. That might be an oversimplification. He says it was taken out of context and it was a 28-second clip. However, Simmons has been talking about it quite a bit on the campaign trail.
That she has. Now, Simmons is a Democrat. So is Bobby Valentine running as an independent, or is he?
Yes, he's completely unaffiliated. That is correct. Not the party, but unaffiliated. He's essentially a petitioning candidate who got some signatures to get on the ballot. That is separate, for example, from the independent party.
Has an independent, well, not an independent party, but has an unaffiliated candidate been able to win in Stamford before? Obviously, you think of Stamford as a Democratic stronghold, right?
Yes, this is very, very hard for a third-party person to win, especially a big race like mayor. The Democrats have had the Stamford mayor's office for 22 out of the last 26 years. So quite a while. Dan Malloy had it for 14 years, and the current incumbent had it for 8. Historically, Stamford would usually switch off every 2 or 4 years, Republican, Democrat, back and forth. But over the last quarter century, it's been a lot more Democratic.
But State Representative Caroline Simmons beat the Democratic challenger, who was the incumbent, correct?
That is correct.
In the primary?
She beat the incumbent mayor, a guy named David Martin. Yes, she beat the incumbent mayor, and she has raised a lot of money. Valentine has also raised a lot of money, including from people like George W. Bush. It's a very high-profile race. It's been featured in GQ magazine, The New Yorker, New York Times, New York Post. It's very high-profile, mostly because of Bobby Valentine.
Interesting. Okay, we will be watching that closely, Chris. Thank you. All right, Danielle, I want to talk to you now. The New Britain mayor's race, right? We have Mayor Erin Stewart, who's running, is it her 5th term that she's looking to capture there in the city as a Republican?
Yes, she's hoping to make history. She already made history. She was the youngest mayor ever elected in New Britain, and she's hoping to make history again, the longest serving Republican, and I believe the longest serving female mayor.
And she's being challenged by State Representative Bobby Sanchez, right? And he's really running on education, from what I was reading.
Yeah, I mean, New Britain's a very interesting city, and I think that's one of the bellwether races that we'll certainly be watching on election night.
And we have petitioning candidate Alfred Mayo, who's also running in this race. And Sanchez, from what I was reading, was saying that Erin Stewart and, well, her administration hasn't given enough resources to the school. And it sounds like Erin Stewart has been kind of pushing the economic revival of New Britain, right?
Yeah, and that's a message that she's sort of made a name for herself statewide. She's been a candidate for various positions statewide in the past, and perhaps will be one again. She is young, and she does already have a lot of years under her belt serving as mayor of New Britain. So we'll see what happens there.
All right, we'll watch that race closely as well. Okay, so I find this incredibly confusing. We also have a mayor's race in New Haven, right? We have Justin Elicker, who's looking to keep his seat. But what it gets a little bit confusing here is Hartford and Bridgeport mayor's races are on a different cycle. Why aren't these all on the same cycle? Why is it different?
I think they switched it. For example, I think in the old days, Bridgeport's mayor was every 2 years, and it was switched to every 4. And sometimes that throws off the cycle, frankly. Different places, different towns are all different. And in most towns, first selectman, for example, is usually every 2 years. It depends. But sometimes they throw it off. So they're not necessarily, some with 2, some with 4, it throws it off a little bit.
I guess that makes sense because those are controlled by the local communities, right? It's not the state controlling when those elections happen. So their town or city, as you use it as an example, in Bridgeport, they control how long their terms are.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. And Hartford, so would that mean that like Mayor Luke Bronin would be up? Is he in a 4-year cycle as well? Would he be up in 2 years from now?
Yes, as far as I know, yes.
Interesting. Okay, so Daniela, you were talking about West Hartford and a little bit of a unique situation there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know your next segment is going to be talking about non-major party candidates, and we're seeing that in West Hartford. We're seeing several Republicans, including several Republican incumbents, leave the party. They are running under the old Connecticut Party banner, which Chris knows very well from his years covering former Governor Lowell Weicker. That was the name, and I'm not sure how many voters, today will remember that because that was a while ago. But they are essentially, they've said, I spoke to some of these candidates over the summer, they are appalled and upset about what's happened within the Republican Party under former President Trump, and they decided that they could no longer be part of the Republican Party. So they're running a slate of candidates. There are still 3 Republicans in the West Hartford race. I believe there's also, this is for town council, by the way, also a Libertarian candidate, and there is another unaffiliated candidate, and there is, of course, the Democrats. So that is a very crowded race, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens, particularly with those, former Republicans who have left the party due to their, disenchantment with what happened on January 6th and the Trump agenda in general.
And you were just explaining this to me before we came on with the mayor's position. Is that at stake right now too? And you were saying that it's whoever gets the most votes for town council?
Yeah, in West Hartford, the tradition has generally been that the mayor and the deputy mayor, with some exceptions, are the two highest vote getters. So Sherry Cantor, there's no separate line for mayor on the ballot. You vote for, the candidates that you want. And traditionally, the council will, once the new council is seated, they will select the new mayor. Traditionally, that's the majority party, the party that wins the most seats in the election, and they traditionally pick the top vote getter.
Interesting. Okay, I want to make sure we get to this because Board of Ed positions are up for grabs in a lot of towns and cities, and this is actually more high profile this year than previously. Explain why. Danielle, I can start with you.
Sure, that's been really interesting. And again, I think it's more fallout, just as we were discussing in the context of West Hartford and the elections there. It's sort of the same dynamic driving the energy behind some of these Board of Education races. There's, a lot of candidates on the Republican side in some communities are running on platforms against the teaching of America's racial history. They are opposed to something called critical race theory, which many agree is not even being taught in Connecticut schools at the K through 12 level, but it is something that they're concerned about. So that is definitely animating some of these races. There's other things swirling as well. There are people running because they're opposed to mask mandates or transgender civil rights. There's a lot happening on the education side, and these races are some of the most interesting and competitive in the state and in the communities where this has become an issue. And certainly Guilford is one example, Coventry, New Canaan, several other communities throughout the state where the Board of Education races are more highly polarizing than some of the races for town council or other spots. It's been really interesting to see that.
All right, thank you, Danielle. Chris, any other races that we didn't cover that you think we should make sure viewers as well as ourselves pay attention to?
The West Haven mayor's race is important. The reason is there's a state representative there named Mike DeMassa who was arrested by the FBI last week for allegedly stealing over $600,000 in federal money that was coming in as the COVID relief money. Anyway, he was appointed or designated by the city council there, along with the mayor, as one of the people who could allocate that money and have access to that money. So he has resigned as a city hall employee. He's resigned as a state legislator. But the fallout on the mayor's race will be up to the voters, obviously. But some of the voters have been saying that there were not enough checks and balances on this for over $600,000 to go missing.
It's a lot of money, that's for sure. Chris Keating, Daniela Altamari, both from the Hartford Courant, more than 40 years of experience covering Connecticut politics between the two of you. Always good to have you on The Real Story, and thanks so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. We will be watching Tuesday, that's for sure.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, if you are sick of the Democrats and the Republicans, there's another party in our state that says it's offering a different alternative to the two-party system. What Sam CT is all about, we're going to talk with Newtown's first selectman who left his political party and is running under Sam CT. Dan Rosenthal joins us along with Sam CT Chair Monty Frank.